The handcuffs didn't frighten her. They irritated her. But for Officer Lewis Burton, snapping those cuffs shut on a crowded Manhattan sidewalk was the closest thing he had left to a throne. He saw a young black woman in a gray hoodie who had looked at him wrong. He saw an easy number, a Friday afternoon statistic that would look clean in a report and mean nothing to anybody by Monday. What he did not see was the federal badge sewn into the lining of her jacket. He did not see the surveillance wire threaded beneath her collar. He did not see the 3 FBI cameras embedded in storefronts on both sides of the block, recording him in 4K resolution from angles that would later make a federal prosecutor smile. What started as a power move on a Midtown sidewalk was about to become the most documented mistake in the history of the New York field office. Because the woman Lewis Burton just handcuffed in front of 40 witnesses wasn't a suspect. She was the investigator, and he had just walked directly into her case. The cold came off the buildings in waves on 43rd Street. It was the kind of bitter, wind-tunnel February that New York manufactures between skyscrapers, the kind that cuts straight through a hoodie and doesn't apologize. Anna Williams had been standing outside the glass entrance of the Meridian Tower for 22 minutes, phone in one hand, coffee cup in the other, watching a second-floor window across the street with the practiced disinterest of someone who appeared to be waiting for a rideshare. She looked the part. That was the whole point. The gray hoodie was 2 sizes too large. The dark jeans were worn at both knees. Her natural hair was pulled into a simple puff at the back of her neck, and the only jewelry she wore was a small stud in each ear. Nothing that said money, nothing that said threat, nothing that said anything at all. She looked like half the women on this block. Mid-20s, somewhere between a gig and a goal, trying to stay warm. Anna Williams was a special agent with the FBI's Civil Rights and Public Corruption Division, assigned to a task force that had spent 7 months building a federal case against the 34th Precinct. Today, she wasn't Agent Williams. She was just Anna. Cover ID clean, backstory airtight, eyes on the window across the street where a dirty sergeant named Pryor was about to exchange a manila envelope with a man who did not officially exist. She checked her watch. For more minutes. Then she heard the footsteps. Officer Lewis Burton was not a young man, but he moved through a crowd the way men move when they've never been told to stop. He was broad across the shoulders, heavy-set in the way that comes from years behind a desk that still calls itself active duty, silver-haired and square-jawed with a face that had settled permanently into mild contempt. 18 years on the force, 11 formal complaints, 0 sustained findings. He wore his badge the way some men wear a wedding ring, not as a symbol of commitment, but as proof that someone somewhere had decided he was worth something. He spotted Anna from 40 feet away. Later, in the federal hearing, the question would be asked, "What made you approach her?" Burton's answer would be 3 words. She seemed suspicious. The follow-up question, suspicious of what, specifically, would produce 14 seconds of silence on the transcript. He approached from her left, thumbs hooked in his belt, pace unhurried in the way that is meant to signal ownership of a space. "Hey!" He stopped 2 feet from her. Not a greeting, a declaration. Anna looked up from her phone. "Good afternoon, officer." Burton didn't respond to the greeting. He looked her up and down the way men look at things they've already decided are lesser. "You got ID on you? May I ask what this is regarding?" His jaw tightened. He hated that. The question. The composure. She hadn't flinched. She hadn't stumbled over her words. She was looking at him the way you look at something mildly inconvenient rather than something powerful. And that specific variety of calm had been making Lewis Burton angry his entire career. "I'm not going to ask twice," he said. Anna shifted her coffee to her left hand and reached slowly into the front pocket of her hoodie, producing a New York State ID under her cover name. She handed it to him with both hands visible. Burton took it. Hold it at arm's length. Read it like it had offended him personally. Ana Reyes. DOB, March 3rd, 1993. Clean. No flags. He ran it through dispatch anyway, hand already moving to the radio on his shoulder. Dispatch, this is Burton, Unit 12. Running an ID check. Reyes, Ana. DOB 0-3-0-3-93. 30 seconds. Then, 12, that ID returns restricted. Federal flag. Level 4 clearance required. Burton lowered the radio. I looked at her. The federal flag didn't mean federal agent to Louis Burton. It meant a sealed record. It meant something worth digging into. It meant she was hiding something good. Restricted file, he said almost to himself. He produced a slow, humorless smile. That's interesting. What are you hiding, sweetheart? Officer? Ana said, and her voice had dropped one register. Not louder, but denser, the way a room changes when the temperature drops. Before this goes any further, I need you to listen to me carefully. I am a federal. Put your hands behind your back. I am a federal agent. My credentials are hands behind your back. Ana closed her eyes for one single second. In that second, she ran the calculation she had run a dozen times in the field. Mission versus moment. If she identified herself formally right now on a public sidewalk, loudly, she burned the surveillance operation. Sergeant Pryor, for minutes away from handing over evidence that would put him away for 12 years, would see the commotion, read the room, and disappear. 7 months of work. Gone. She could take the hit. She had taken hits before. She put her hands behind her back. Burton stepped behind her and ratcheted the cuffs on tight. Tighter than procedure, tight enough to feel like a message. Ana kept her face forward, jaw set, eyes fixed on the middle distance. Around them, pedestrians slowed. A woman in a red coat stopped entirely. 2 men in construction vests exchanged a look. Nobody said anything. Nobody ever said anything. You're being detained, Burton announced, loud enough for the sidewalk to hear, one hand gripping the chain between her cuffs. Suspected narcotics possession. Suspicious behavior. You want to explain what you're doing standing outside this building for the last 20 minutes. Waiting, Ana said. For what? She turned her head slightly, just enough for her voice to carry clearly toward the storefront to her left, toward the small black circle above the door that looked like a security sensor and was, in fact, a federal camera with a directional microphone. For you, she said quietly, to make exactly this mistake. Burton didn't hear it as a warning. He heard it as defiance. He shoved her forward toward his patrol car, one hand on the chain, steering her past the slowing crowd, past the woman in the red coat who had pulled out her phone, past the building entrance where a man in a second-floor window across the street had just looked down, seen the commotion, and was already reaching for his coat. Sergeant Pryor would not make his meeting today, but that, Ana had already decided, was acceptable collateral damage. Because somewhere 3 blocks north, in the back of a gray surveillance van with government plates and blacked-out windows, Special Agent Derek Cole had just lifted his headset, looked at the agent beside him, and said 4 words into a secure radio channel. They've got her. Move. Burton had thought he was making an arrest. What he had actually done was pull the pin. Louis Burton had been a cop long enough to know, or so he believed, exactly what trouble looked like. And trouble, in his 18 years of accumulated certainty, looked like a young black woman standing outside a building she had no business standing outside of, staring at a phone she was probably using to case the block. He spotted her from half a block away. He was running a standard midtown patrol, the kind that required nothing from him but presence. A slow roll down 43rd, a loop back up 44th, coffee going cold in the cup holder, radio murmuring its steady low frequency of other people's problems. It was the kind of shift that asked nothing of a man and gave nothing back. Burton was used to those. He had stopped expecting more from the job years ago. What he hadn't stopped expecting was deference. And the woman by the Meridian Tower entrance was not giving any. She wasn't doing anything, technically. That was almost the problem. She was just standing there. Hoodie up against the wind, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, with the settled, unhurried patience of someone who had nowhere to be and no anxiety about it. People waiting on this block checked their watches. They shifted their weight. They looked up the street for their car or their person or their reason. This woman wasn't looking for anything. She was simply watching, still in a way that felt deliberate. Burton pulled to the curb and sat for a moment, engine idling, telling himself he was assessing. He reached for his radio. Dispatch 12. I've got a female, mid-20s, possible loiter situation outside 1180 43rd. No visible purpose. Logging a contact stop. Dispatch acknowledged with a standard copy. Burton didn't need their permission. He never waited for it. He stepped out of the car. Anna heard the door. She didn't turn around, but her eyes moved. A small, almost imperceptible recalibration of her gaze, and she clocked him in her peripheral vision the way she had been trained to clock everything. Quietly, completely, and without giving herself away. She recognized the type before he opened his mouth. She had arrested men exactly like him before. She kept her face forward and waited. He didn't say good afternoon. He didn't say excuse me. He stopped 2 feet from her and said, ID. The way you say it to someone you've already decided is guilty of something, as a formality, not a question. Anna turned slowly. She looked at him with the particular brand of patience that is not submission but looks enough like it to pass, and reached into her pocket without a word. She produced the New York State ID and held it out with 2 fingers, both hands visible, every movement slow and deliberate, and recorded by a camera mounted above a storefront entrance 11 feet to her left. Burton took it. He looked at it the way men look at things they want to find fault with. He read it twice. Ana Reyes. Clean name. Clean format. Nothing wrong with it, which seemed to bother him more than if there had been. He keyed his radio, called in the ID, shifted his weight and stared at her while he waited, as if sustained eye contact was itself a form of authority. The response came back in under 40 seconds. Restricted file. Federal flag. Level 4 clearance required. Burton's eyes narrowed. He turned the radio down slightly, not off, just lower, and looked at her with the expression of a man who had just convinced himself he was onto something. Restricted file, he repeated slowly. You want to explain that? No, Anna said, because I don't have to. The temperature between them dropped several degrees. Burton shifted his jaw to the side, grinding something invisible, and took 1 slow step closer. I'm smelling marijuana, he said. Coming from you or your immediate area. That gives me probable cause for a search. He said it with the ease of a man who had said it 100 times before, in 100 different variations, to 100 different people who had no way to prove otherwise. It was smooth, practiced, weightless in his mouth. Anna didn't blink. She looked at him steadily and said nothing, because she understood exactly what was happening and exactly where it was going, and because 43 feet behind her left shoulder, a second concealed FBI camera had just autofocused on Louis Burton's face. He had no idea he was auditioning. I'm not consenting to a search, Anna said. You don't have probable cause. A claimed smell, unverifiable and uncorroborated, does not meet the Terry standard on a public sidewalk, and you know that. She said it evenly, not loudly, not with the trembling indignation of someone who had just learned their rights from the internet, but with the flat, technical precision of someone who had testified about those exact standards in federal court on 4 separate occasions. It landed the way facts land on men who don't want to hear them, badly. Burton's expression didn't change. Exactly. It hardened. The way concrete hardens, not dramatically, just into something less yielding and more permanent. You a lawyer now? I'm a citizen, Anna said, invoking my Fourth Amendment right to be free from unreasonable search. That's not a negotiation, officer. That's the Constitution. The word Constitution hit him like a small personal insult. She watched his hand move before the rest of him did, the way the body announces a decision before the mind has fully signed off on it. And then his fingers were around her left forearm, grip firm and immediate, and he was already reaching for the cuffs at his belt. Turn around. Officer Burton. Her voice dropped one register. Calm as water, permanent as stone. I am advising you, for the last time, to reconsider what you're doing. He didn't. The cuffs came out. He turned her with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this to enough people that it no longer required thought, and snapped them shut at her wrists. Tight, too tight, the metal finding bone, and Anna kept her face forward and her expression exactly where she needed it to be. Still, composed, unreadable. Not because she wasn't furious, but because her fury was not the weapon she was using today. Around her, the sidewalk had begun to slow. A man in a delivery vest stopped mid-stride. A woman holding a child's hand took 2 unconscious steps backward. 3 phones came up without their owners fully deciding to raise them. None of them knew they were supplementing a federal surveillance operation. Neither did Louis Burton, who had just committed on camera from 3 separate angles his first federal offense of the afternoon. The 34th precinct smelled like burnt coffee and old decisions. Anna was walked through the side entrance with one hand on her arm and processed into the booking area with the mechanical efficiency of a place that had done this too many times to feel anything about it. She was sat on a bench. She was told not to speak. She didn't. Burton found Captain Gerald Moss in the narrow corridor outside the watch commander's office, arms crossed, reading something on his phone with the expression of a man perpetually underwhelmed by the world. Moss was 53, gray at the temples, with the thick neck and careful eyes of someone who had survived 2 departmental investigations and a city council inquiry by being very precise about what he said out loud and to whom. Burton pulled him aside, kept his voice low. Brought in a female. Stop and detain on 43rd. She was uncooperative, refused consent to search, got physical when I tried to cuff her. He paused. Found a small baggie in her front hoodie pocket. Cocaine. Maybe 2 grams. Moss looked at him for a long moment. Tested. Not yet. Witnessed. Burton's jaw moved slightly. Solo patrol. Moss said nothing for 3 full seconds. He looked down the corridor, then back at Burton with the expression of a man doing arithmetic. He had buried cleaner cases than this. He had written reports that transformed unlawful stops into textbook procedure and signed them without losing a night's sleep. He knew exactly what Burton was asking and exactly what it would cost both of them if it unraveled. And he had calculated in those 3 seconds that the cost of not complying was higher. Write it up clean, Moss said quietly. Exact sequence. Smell, refusal, search, discovery. Keep the language tight and don't editorialize. Burton nodded. Moss walked away. Neither man looked up at the ventilation unit mounted above the booking bench, a standard issue grate, slightly newer than the ones beside it, installed during what the facilities log described as routine HVAC maintenance 4 months prior. The federal listening device inside it had a battery life of 18 months and a transmission range of half a mile. It had recorded every word. The personal effects process was handled by Officer Denny Craw, 26 years old, 14 months on the job, still at the stage of his career where he followed procedure because he believed in it rather than because he feared the consequences of not. He worked methodically, emptying pockets, cataloging contents, logging each item on the intake form with the focused attention of someone who hadn't yet learned which details to overlook. The hoodie went into a property bag. The coffee cup had been left on the sidewalk. The phone was logged, bagged, placed in a tray. The New York State ID under the name Ana Reyes was logged separately. Then Craw's fingers found the interior lining of the jacket. It had been sewn in carefully, not a factory pocket, but a clean alteration, the kind a person makes when they need to carry something important and invisible simultaneously. His fingers closed around a flat leather case, slim and firm, and he pulled it free with the mild curiosity of someone who doesn't yet know what he's holding. He opened it. The gold caught the fluorescent light first, then the seal, then the words, rendered in the precise, unambiguous typography of a document that does not leave room for interpretation. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent, Anna M. Williams. Craw stood very still for a moment. Then he closed the case, looked down the hallway in both directions, and went to find Burton. He found him at his desk, report half written, and placed the credential case on the surface between them without a word. Burton looked at it. He picked it up. He opened it. The room, to the listening device in the ceiling above them, went quiet. Later, in the Federal Evidentiary Review, an audio technician would count the silence precisely. 11 seconds. 11 seconds of a man staring at a gold badge and calculating the distance between where he was and where he could never come back from. Then Burton closed the case and slipped it into the breast pocket of his uniform. "That's not real," he said. His voice was almost steady. "Lots of people carry fake badges." Craw looked at him for just a moment too long. Then he looked away, and in doing so made the second worst decision of his career. Moss closed his office door with the quiet deliberateness of a man who understood that some conversations changed the acoustics of a room. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Burton sat. He placed the credential case on the desk between them without preamble, the way you place evidence, because that's what it was. Moss looked at it for a long time without touching it. "Where did you find it?" "Sewn into the jacket lining," Burton said. "Craw found it during intake." "Where's Craw now?" "At his desk. He'll follow my lead." Moss picked up the case, opened it, closed it, set it back down. The fluorescent light above him hummed its single indifferent note. Outside the frosted glass of his office window, the precinct moved through its ordinary afternoon rhythms. Phones, keyboards, the distant clang of the holding area door, entirely unaware that the two men in this room were making a decision that would reduce all of it to rubble. "If she's actually Bureau," Moss said slowly, "and this goes up the chain before we control the narrative, there is no version of this that ends with either of us keeping a pension." Burton leaned forward. "So we control the narrative." Moss looked at him. "We had cocaine," Burton said, "logged from a prior seizure, sitting in the evidence room. 2 grams. Unmarked. We put it in her jacket before it goes back to property. Suddenly the badge is a prop and she's a woman with drugs and a fake credential who resisted arrest. Her word against the report. And the report," he said, "will be airtight." Moss was quiet for 4 seconds. Then he nodded, once, and that nod would later be played in a federal courtroom from the audio recording captured through the wall-mounted smoke detector that the FBI's technical unit had converted into a listening device 8 months prior. Neither man knew. 3 blocks north, in the back of a gray surveillance van, Special Agent Derek Cole pulled off his headset, turned to the agent beside him, and picked up the secure line to the field office. "They're going to plant," he said. "We need extraction. Now." The authorization came back in under 90 seconds. 12 agents began moving. Burton was 4 sentences into his false report when the cameras went dark. It happened without drama. No flicker, no warning, no cascading system error that might have given a person time to interpret what was occurring. The external feeds simply stopped, all 6 of them simultaneously at 4:47 in the afternoon, and the monitor at the front desk displayed 6 identical squares of solid black, clean and absolute, like the system had decided it had seen enough. The desk officer tapped the monitor twice. Called down to the IT room. Got no answer. He didn't yet understand that the IT room was no longer relevant. 30 seconds later, every radio in the building cut to a frequency none of them recognized. The voices of dispatch of Unit 12 of the afternoon patrol channels. All of it dropped away, replaced by a single, calm, authoritative tone that identified itself as the FBI New York field office and instructed all personnel to remain at their current positions, secure their sidearms, and await further instruction. The precinct went very still. In Moss's office, the secure line on his desk began to ring. He stared at it for one full ring before picking it up. The voice on the other end identified itself, named his rank, named his badge number, and informed him that a federal prosecutor from the Southern District of New York was currently on the phone with the police commissioner, and that the commissioner had, in the last 4 minutes, granted full federal access to the building and everything inside it. Moss set the phone down without hanging it up. He looked at the credential case still sitting on his desk. He looked at Burton. Burton had stopped typing. Outside, the front entrance was sealed first. Then the rear. Then the narrow service access on the east side that most people forgot existed. 12 agents in tactical vests moved with the practiced quiet of people who had planned this entry for weeks, because they had. The building didn't brace for impact. It simply found itself surrounded before anyone inside thought to look out a window. The blue wall didn't crumble. There was no gradual erosion, no cascade of second thoughts. No moment where loyalty outran consequence. It was demolished from the outside all at once, by people who had been building the case to do exactly that for 7 months and had been waiting, with considerable patience, for Louis Burton to give them the final brick. He had given them several. They walked her from holding still cuffed, which was deliberate. Anna had requested it. She wanted the cuffs on when she entered the room, because she wanted Louis Burton to see them come off. The interview room was small and aggressively lit, the kind of light that leaves no shadows to hide in. When the door opened, she registered the 3 tactical vests first, then the face of Supervisory Special Agent Diane Okafor, her direct superior, 12-year veteran, a woman who communicated primarily through controlled stillness. Standing at the far end of the table with her arms folded and an expression that said, "I told you this operation would pay off," without moving a single muscle. Okafor nodded to the agent on Anna's left. The cuffs came off.
Anna straightened it slowly.
Rolled both wrists once. Accepted the credential case that Okafor held out across the table. Retrieved, she noted, from the breast pocket of Louis Burton's uniform approximately 22 minutes ago, and held it for a moment before clipping it to her waistband where it belonged. Nobody spoke. There was nothing that needed saying yet. Burton was brought in 4 minutes later, wrists zip-tied, uniform jacket removed, the particular bewilderment of a man whose entire operating framework had just been revoked sitting plainly on his face. He saw the tactical agents first, then Okafor, then Anna, sitting at the head of the table, badge visible, hands folded, watching him with the same steady, unreadable calm he had spent the entire afternoon mistaking for weakness. He stopped moving when he saw her. Anna let the silence run for a moment. Then she opened the folder in front of her and began. She walked him through it chronologically. The sidewalk stop, the illegal search demand, the fabricated smell, the cuffs. She played him 12 seconds of audio from the booking corridor, his own voice close and clear, telling Craw the badge wasn't real. She showed him a still frame from the surveillance camera above his desk, the credential case moving from the evidence tray into his uniform pocket, time-stamped to the second. She laid it out piece by piece, without heat, without satisfaction, without anything in her voice that resembled the rage she had spent the entire afternoon containing. Just facts, just evidence, just the meticulous, irrefutable architecture of a case that had been waiting for him to complete it himself. Burton said nothing. He had used all his words up on the wrong woman, in front of the wrong cameras, inside a building that had been listening to him for 7 months. There was nothing left to say that the recordings hadn't already answered. Anna closed the folder. "We're done here," she said. The trial lasted 11 days. The verdict took 4 hours. Louis Burton was convicted on 6 federal counts: civil rights violations under color of law, unlawful arrest, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, theft of federal property, and conspiracy. The jury did not deliberate long because the evidence did not require deliberation. It required only the willingness to listen, to the audio from the booking corridor, to the recording from Moss's office, to the 11 seconds of silence that preceded a man slipping a federal badge into his own pocket and deciding, in that stillness, to become something irredeemable. He was sentenced to 23 years. Captain Gerald Moss received 17 concurrent, handed down 2 weeks later by a federal judge who noted in her remarks that Moss's particular brand of corruption, quiet, administrative, dressed in the language of procedure, was in many ways more corrosive than Burton's blunt cruelty, because it was the kind that taught younger officers what was permissible. 11 other officers in the 34th faced departmental charges. 4 were terminated. 3 were indicted separately. The precinct was placed under federal oversight for a period of no less than 5 years. Officer Denny Craw cooperated fully with investigators. His case was handled separately. Anna Williams was promoted to Supervisory Special Agent 8 weeks after the verdict, assigned to a new task force operating out of the Washington field office, focused on systemic civil rights abuses in municipal law enforcement agencies across 4 states. The promotion was not announced with ceremony. It came in the form of a folder on her desk, a new credential case with updated language, and a meeting with Okafor that lasted 20 minutes and ended with a handshake. She walked into the federal building on Pennsylvania Avenue on a Tuesday morning in March, suit pressed, badge visible, heels quiet on the marble floor. She was thinking about the next case before she reached the elevator. She was already 3 steps into a problem that had no clean edges yet, turning it the way you turn something unfamiliar in your hands, looking for the place where it opens. Somewhere behind her, through a courthouse window in New York, Louis Burton began year 1 of 23. He had wanted to be the most powerful person in every room he entered. He should have checked who else was in the room. Anna Williams didn't just walk out of that precinct. She walked out with 23 years of proof that dignity is more durable than a corrupt badge, and that the truth, when you build it carefully and protect it patiently, does not need to raise its voice. Louis Burton spent 18 years believing that power was something you wore on your chest. He never considered that the most dangerous person in any room is the one who already knows exactly how the story ends. If this story gave you the justice you came here for, go ahead and hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to hear stories like this one. Share it with someone who believes that doing the right thing quietly still matters. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications, because I have more stories coming. Real twists, real karma, real moments where the truth finally collects what it's owed. Thank you for watching. And remember, be kind, be patient, be underestimated if you have to, because you never truly know who you're standing across from. See you in the next one.